It's PRESSCORE people. I'm David Cruz. Immigration on the agenda this week as the governor signs some bills. Then Cory Booker announces his presidential campaign, right? Plus, who wants to be a cannabis connoisseur? We're hotboxing with the PRESSCORE panel right after this.
Hey, we're taking a break from the show to remind you that when you like, subscribe, and share this content, you're helping us build an audience for independent journalism. Thanks for streaming. Let's get back to the program.
All right, let's bring in the PRESSCORE panel here. Jelani Gibson covers the state for NJ Advanced Media. Aaron Morrill is founder and editor at the Jersey City Times. And Matt Friedman is a reporter for Politico and editor of the New Jersey Playbook. So let's start with immigration. Bills passed and signed. Quick as that, Jelani. ¿Qué pasó?
Well, the bills were signed after obviously not being signed in certain portions underneath Governor Phil Murphy. Senator Ruiz also made mention of that at the bill signing about how the bills were, in her words, languishing underneath the Golden Dome. And so the bills are signed, although the Democrats, particularly progressive Democrats, they are going to push for more protections. They've said that they still do want more protections for people that have been accused of crimes, for people that are on final deportation orders so that they can appeal those orders. And so these bills have been signed, but we're probably going to see more bills introduced.
Yeah. Matt, last year, Cheryl was kind of cool to the immigration stuff. Has she seen the light, or has she found an issue that she can pound Donald Trump with?
It's the politics have completely shifted on immigration, which is one of the reasons Trump was elected on immigration enforcement. And I think the public mood is clearly has gone too far. And, seeing a couple people, gunned down in the streets might get you there. That seems to have happened here. So I think really it seems like this was a tougher call for Cheryl during the campaign. She was very vague about her support for things like this and wouldn't commit to it. And it's sort of a no-brainer politically now. And that's why I think you saw really no resistance to it from her administration.
Yeah. And for sure in New Jersey, but also to national Democrats. Not that that's part of the calculation at all, but it is, right?
Yeah, I think, and this isn't the only state who has enacted laws like this. It's not the only state that has enacted mask bans. I mean, seeing government agents heavily armed in masks dragging people out of cars when it's not clear what their immigration status is or whether they've committed any crimes aside from traffic violations, that will do a lot to change the public perception of immigration enforcement and what's going on. There's a lot more in like what you're told people are doing versus what you can see with your own eyes.
Yeah. All right, let's meet and say hello to Aaron Morrill, the founder and editor at Jersey City Times. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about the Jersey City Times.
Well, I founded it in 2019. I had come sort of from an activist background, doing sort of good government work, worked early on in the pay-to-play legislation that was enacted in the aughts in Jersey City, pushed through with the help of a person we're going to talk about later, Stephen Fulop. But I was with a small good government group. And so I was on the sides as a good government sort of activist, and about 2019 I started seeing that I thought that the press wasn't really covering Jersey City with the kind of vigor that I thought it needed to be covered, and so I got pushed into this by friends. Said, "Yeah, Aaron, you got to do this. You got to do this." Started Jersey City Times in 2019.
2019. I mean, that's a long haul in a business where everything else is shrinking. How are you managing to do that?
Yeah, I was fortunate to have enough money in the bank to self-fund and do this sort of on the cheap. I hired a Pakistani coder to create my website, and I hired a couple of former Jersey Journal reporters and Star Ledger reporters to do freelance reporting for me. I really didn't know much about journalism. My background was law.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, there you go. And not a bad background as it turns out, but I had a lot to learn. And so it's and then I got funding last year from a foundation based in New Haven. So that was beautiful, and we now have three full-time reporters in addition to me, and we still got a couple of freelancers working. So we're now posting, three things a day, four things a day. And it's great. We can go deep. I'm giving them benefits. It's a dream.
Yeah.
I mean, I really got very lucky.
Well, we welcome you. Jersey City has been a hot spot for ICE activity. You think these bills are really going to have an impact on ICE activity in Jersey in general?
My sense is no. I think ICE is going to continue to do what they do, irrespective of these bills. I think these bills I hate to be cynical, but we talk about being cynical reporters. Well, I think these bills are to some degree performative. I mean, I think that they make everybody feel like our local representatives are
We're doing
standing up
something.
for are doing something, but I think it's limited what they can actually do.
Yeah.
But you do see at the national level, there does seem to be a vibe shift, so things have changed, I think.
All
But
right.
it's a huge issue in Jersey City. I mean, it's an immigrant city. Huge
Yeah.
thing. Huge.
All right. Cory Booker, book time. Matt, no bigger campaign announcement than a new book, right?
Who reads these things?
Who buys them?
I'm sorry. Like, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've read as little political books as possible because I believe, like, generally from what I have read of them, which is very little, again, granted, but there's very little of value in reading very specifically what. Now, I don't know if the senator wrote this himself or had the help of a ghostwriter on it, but like what they put out there, if I want to know what I can listen to you speak. I'm just like I don't believe, especially someone who's going to run for president. And this isn't, I haven't read the book, so I'm not panning it. I'm just saying I don't believe in these books. There's really ever anything of value. I don't. I'm sorry. Like, we see what they want to put out there, but I think with politicians, really, if you want to learn about a politician, just watch what they do, not what they say. And so I don't want to read 350 pages of what they say. I just want to see what they do. So no, I'm sorry, I'm going to do everything I can to not read that book, just like every other book put out by a politician in my entire career.
Yes, but it is a harbinger of things to come from Cory Booker, yeah? I mean, he shared the stage with Bon Jovi.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he couldn't get Springsteen, I'm sure, but like, I'm not saying he tried, but um, yeah. I mean, he's been running since the last time he ran. He runs. It's like
He
that's.
runs. Cory runs.
I don't
That's
think
what
he
he
ever really
does.
stopped.
Jelani, he did make news, though. He made a pledge that he's taking no more AIPAC money or no more PAC money. I mean, that's a thing, right?
Well, the politics have shifted
Yeah.
how the Democratic Party is willing to approach AIPAC and everything, both on the national level and obviously here on the local level. This would not have been a position that any reporter would have expected Senator Booker to take at the outset of the war. And there are some activist groups that are needling him for the change due to that earlier support. And so the organization itself seems to have become less popular with the tactics that they've oftentimes used to go against politicians.
Yeah. Aaron, we've seen Cory Booker for 20 plus years now. He was at 2% or so when he dropped out the last time. Has anything changed in your mind since he last ran?
I don't see it. I don't know if anybody else does. I mean, I think he's got a brand that people know what it is and see him as an energetic, thoughtful guy who's, left of center and but, tends to be, not too far left for most people.
Right.
In fact, he had a close connection with the Jewish community. He used to go to the Chabad, I think, in college. He used to talk
Yep.
about. So he's always been sort of a friend of the Jewish community. That's my sense. But I do think there's a lot of pressure, when it comes to AIPAC. I see that. I see Mussab Ali in Jersey City, running, a campaign built around AIPAC.
Save that. We're going to get to that.
Yeah, we will. Yeah. So no, but I don't see any big difference. But I'm not covering Booker as closely as
Yeah.
some of
Also,
the panelists.
okay, I just want to say in general, we see a lot of, no pact pledges from politicians. They're really
Right.
they're mostly kind of meaningless because these corporations can just their employees will give, they'll structure it in a certain way. And they can't, because it's independent, all these super PACs that are tied to that are run by, very people who are very close to these politicians and are independent, they
Right.
don't have to abide by those pledges. And the politicians can just wash their hands of it, say, I have nothing to do with it, but they can take all this, money. The super PACs can take this money and spend it independently. So I just feel like we always talk about this, but it's essentially meaningless. The money still gets there. And also, I think Cory Booker was careful not to single out AIPAC. That's why he's talking about all this other stuff. He's really trying to walk the line here and not alienate the pro-Israel community, not to be confused with the Jewish community. I also think
Right.
we often really overplay, like we're talking about in Hathaway versus Mejia. You know, there's a segment of American Jews who are very, very pro-Israel and, base their votes on it, but I really don't think it's the majority of them. Most American Jews are pretty secular and they're pretty democratic.
Yeah. All right. If we were a sports show, this would be our fumble of the week or our unforced error of the week. Analilia Mejia seemingly cruising to victory in mostly blue CD11 refuses to debate her opponent unless she can help pick the moderators. Then she ends up having to debate the guy in front of a probably all-white panel against the guy whose campaign was having a hard time getting started in the beginning. Matt, can we call it Analilia's folly?
Yeah, I first of all, according to their campaign, they didn't say they wanted to choose the moderator. They just wanted to see a list of people
Yeah.
proposing whatever. We can get into the details there. I
Right.
think their folly was like, look, I understand. What is the point? Why would they want to debate? Politically, it makes no sense for them to want to debate. On a good government grounds, yes, you absolutely should debate. We should all get a chance to see the person who's probably going to be our next congressperson answer some questions, from independent people. But I think where they went wrong was, whatever spurred the League of Women Voters to put out this unusual statement saying that they can't arrange this and blaming Anna campaign. And they came back with, well, they wouldn't commit to diversity. And, it was like, did they demand that when there were 13 or so, or however freaking many candidates there were running when she participated in the forums hosted by the same exact groups during the primary? There was no demand. And the moderator was a person of color who the League of Women Voters had planned to ask to do it again, according to them. So no, it really looked like just an excuse to avoid debating. And I think it got away from them. Like, I think they didn't want to debate, and the debate over the debate started consuming a lot of oxygen. So they cut their losses a few days later after, we in the media all kind of called them out on it. Because honestly, like from my conversations with them over the weekend and everything, like my BS detector was just going off so strongly about their rationale for skipping these debates.
I feel a little bit like it's with some of these congressional campaigns that it becomes a conflict between the DC people and the local people. Jelani, do you see that sometimes?
I mean, you can see that, sometimes, but here, what you're looking at with the debate, right, is it's not even really clear to me that most supporters would have just taken a more honest answer of, we think this person is a nobody, therefore we want to debate them. And from a press corps perspective, I don't really think our articles would have been as we probably wouldn't have covered it as much if she had just come out as a candidate and said this person doesn't have a lot of support. We don't want to give them the attention. Press corps probably just would have been like,
Okay, she's
yeah,
kind of right, but yeah.
yeah, But as was mentioned earlier, she's also running this good government transparency campaign, and that would that have been a deal breaker for her supporters? I have not heard any of her allies indicate that this would have been a deal breaker for them.
Yeah, and I
Yeah, and
mean
I
he
just want to add
was.
that it was co-sponsored by the ACLU. It was the League of Women Voters, which is it's like, oh, come on.
Yeah,
That's not what this is about. And we all could see it. That's
yeah.
all.
But she's probably going to win, right?
Oh yeah. There's
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
absolutely, I mean, have you seen the mail-in ballots coming in? It's like 4-1 in her favor. And the
Making it an
special election,
even worse blunder.
which I mean, 4-1 Democrats. I can't say they're all voting for her, but like it's obviously going her way. The election is on a Thursday in
Yeah,
April. so the election day turnout already, is just going to be pretty low compared to
Yeah.
what it would normally be. I just don't see any possible way, especially in a special election, in this environment where you have Donald Trump's state house district in Florida flipping Democratic. How the hell does a Republican win in this environment? No matter how moderate Hathaway's message is, and it's not time for, it's just hard to see how that happens.
Yeah. So we talked about Booker's AIPAC money earlier. The issues come up in another race. Aaron, you started talking about it. Rob Menendez, the incumbent in CD8, facing a challenge from Mussab Ali. And AIPAC has been at the center of it, yeah? I mean, he seems like a long shot, Ali, but is his attack on Menendez working on any voters, you think?
Yeah, look, we don't. I don't think we have any polling. There's probably some internal polling. Maybe Matt knows more about that, or Jelani, but I haven't seen anything. Menendez, I saw him recently. He seems confident. I think he said something to me to the effect that, yeah, maybe in Jersey City, there will be some traction for
Argument.
Mussab.
Yeah.
But I think Mussab appeals to a very young, sort of progressive, hyper progressive, DSA almost crowd. And he has a passionate following. I saw that in the mayoral run, but I think it's probably pretty limited to Jersey City, if I were to guess.
Yeah.
And that's where he's got name recognition. But it's very much like the old saying, it's like every sentence is subject, verb, APAC, with Mussab. So I think he's going to have to, if he wants to have a chance, he probably needs to fill out his critique of Menendez, because
With a little
Menendez
more
seems
stuff.
popular. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he needs more than that. And
Yeah.
and remember, yeah. So I would leave it there. Yeah, yeah.
I feel like the Menendez voters are like, what can government do for us? And the Ali voters are like, let's make government leftist. But
Yeah, yeah, it's a different view of
yeah,
government. Yeah, and clearly Menendez has a lot of institutional support. I mean, it seems like he's liked. I see that, and he is a likable guy. And I'm not saying Mussab isn't one to
right.
one. Mussab seems like a very nice guy, but Menendez does well. I saw him recently at the Newark Museum. He was hobnobbing with everybody. People like him. He's
It's
Don-
always interesting to see people like Rob Menendez, and I think Donald Norcross is sort of a much older but South Jersey corollary to the people who are like just spawn of political machines, literally, right? Or at least related, literally
yes.
related. And then, when they get in, they take the temperature of the district and they represent the district in the way that, and so I think that's what's happened in both those cases, and neither has really faced much of a serious. I mean, Ali could be a serious challenge, I suppose, but they've both, pretty much read the districts correctly and represented it in a way, even if the way they came to power wasn't the most democratic way you could imagine.
Yeah.
It's also important to note that Menendez is not necessarily without bona fides on the progressive front, especially since Delaney Hall and the
Yeah.
immigration legislation and everything like that. And he does seem like he's made a lot of communication and distancing himself from the machine and his father and things like that. And so, when you see Menendez also, floating around in the same circles as LaMonica McIver
Right.
and Ras Baraka, it's also not clear to me whether or not there would even be necessarily a particular progressive base that exclusively votes for this one candidate. It might be a possibility that they split it essentially.
Yeah, that's how you end up with the Hudson Democratic Unity ticket, right, Jelani? I mean, is
Yeah,
is is the
yeah,
fusion ticket
all
the flavor of
politics.
the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, all politics are local, right?
Yeah.
Like do the local voters care more about AIPAC, or do the local voters care
Right.
more about a position on immigration? And one issue seems to be hitting home a lot harder for voters than the other.
Yeah.
By the
Is
way,
that
the,
where
the
we're going to
Hudson
end up,
Unity
Matt,
ticket.
in that kind of
Yeah, well,
environment?
look, the Hudson Unity ticket is kind of funny, and I think it's funny on the progressives' parts for immediately aligning with, the traditional
Yeah.
machine.
Yes.
But it's It's Hudson County, like the unity in Hudson County. Can they hold it till the election? Maybe we'll see. But there's no such like unity. Even when they had the county line, the political machine in Hudson County always would split every few years, and you'd have some giant war between Brian Stack and Nick Stack and whatever little political boss has their parochial interest at stake, whether it's Bayonne or whatever, because the politics of Hudson County are so town based and so parochial often that I just don't see this unity lasting too long. I'm sorry, just based on history.
I mean, plus, Aaron, unity is bad for business.
Right. Terrible, terrible. I thought, I thought after James Solomon took office, we were going to kind of have nothing to write about. But it's funny. I just, the stories keep coming. So, I've been cheered that we've got actually a fair amount to write about these days.
Well, you brought him up. We're going to talk about Steve Fulop in a moment and how much you guys loved one another. But what's your sizing up of James Solomon?
I think he's off to a strong start overall. I think it's early days, obviously, but
Still fertile times to blame the other guy.
yes, exactly. And I think he can get away with it at this point
Yeah,
because he came into office with this massive deficit. I don't think there was any way that James could be blamed for it. He had consistently voted against these budgets. He probably could have been more vocal as a councilman in going after Fulop for these things, but he did kind of keep his distance from these budgets. And so I think his when Fulop says this is politics, I'm sort of scratching my head. What politics is he talking about? They're not running against each other. Fulop
yeah,
is out of politics,
yeah.
and Fulop has not. He has not actually questioned the numbers. I have not seen him say these are fake numbers,
Yeah.
fake
Hold
news.
your fire on, Philip. We're going to get to him
Yeah,
before we
okay.
finish.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
I've
Matt
got some stuff
Bashero.
to say about Steve too.
All right, good. All right, let's skip the talk about the budget then. Damn it. Let's go right to Steve Fulop. He's finally showing his true colors, Matt. No?
He's showing his colors of what is necessary at the moment. It happens to completely contradict what he proposed in New Jersey when he was running for governor, when he wanted to raise taxes on
Yeah.
corporations and the wealthy. He absolutely did. His plan was right there. And now he's saying these things are bad. So I guess they're bad for New York City, but good for New Jersey, maybe. I don't know. He lives there now. There was just one thing I wanted to say about him that's just not quite related to this that I reported a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
That was just so outrageous, okay? Which is that we all probably at this point saw the video of his deputy chief of staff's like just horribly embarrassing DUI arrest where he's throwing around all his associations. He's
Yeah.
slurring his words. I don't know what his blood alcohol content was. Nobody was because he wouldn't consent to a test. But after you see this, and this happened, that you would go back and give this guy civil service protections, which is the exact opposite of the intention of civil service, which is to take politics out of the decisions. You see this guy in your administration. I'm not saying
Contextualize that. When you say he got civil service, explain that to people.
the Fulop administration, I'm not saying the mayor personally signed off on this, but he was the mayor,
Yeah.
went back and gave this guy a civil service title, entitling him to job protections. And not only that, but they dated it back to August so that he didn't even have to go through the probationary period. And we see this video of this guy 5:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Now, I don't know if he was working that day, but if he was inebriated, the amount of inebriation he appeared to have would not be the amount you could get if you started drinking at 5:01 p.m., okay? So let's just take that much. That this was a Tuesday. I don't know if he was working, but he was in Jersey City and he doesn't live there. And in my judgment, not according to the law, but in my judgment, the guy was completely sloshed. Like you can watch the video yourself and make your judgment. So you go back and you give him civil service protections after that to make it difficult for the next administration to fire him. That is completely outrageous. And it is, I have to wonder, and I haven't looked into this yet. Maybe I will, maybe Aaron will, but who else did the administration give civil service protections to on the way out?
Aaron, that sounds totally full up ease. You guys had a really, you battled for almost the entire time he was there, no?
Well, to some degree, I mean, I don't think anybody will, be surprised by this, but to some degree, I started Jersey City Times not to go after Fulop specifically, but because I thought the news ecosystem was not doing its job, and that the administration was able to sort of set the terms. Um, So
They banned you from press
um, I was
conferences.
I was blacklisted very quickly, and for years I got no media advisories,
Yeah.
um, and was basically cut out.
Jelani,
Yeah.
that's Steve Fulop to the core, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just needed you to say yeah because I'm running out of time. And I wanted to get to this very important piece that you wrote
Yeah.
about High Times hosting its first ever Cannabis Cup competition in New Jersey that allows consumers to test top cannabis products. Well, how do we sign up for that? If one
Well,
were interested.
well, I mean, they do have a website where you can just, go there and, find out who's selling a kit,
Does it show that cannabis has arrived as kind of a connoisseurable kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's arrived in a consumer aspect, whether or not the weed is better than what you can get on the street. I
Yeah.
guess it depends on which weed dealer you know.
Right. And which
You
street
know,
you live on.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there. I've spoken to some people, and they say, "Oh, this weed is so much more better." The other guy used to give me shake, and
Right.
I've spoken to other people
Matt,
who
he's
are
using
like, "Yeah."
terminology that I don't understand, but I know that this is a subject that's near and dear to your heart, as you have advocated before many times with strong editorial arguments. Proceed.
I just would like to note that it would be nice if the High Times Cannabis Cup could have a home grow competition. Unfortunately, in New Jersey, there's no way that's going to happen. I'm not sure if the High Times Cannabis Cups normally have that, but I know other cannabis cups in other states do. But of course, it's still a felony, and you could still wind up in prison for growing one plant in New Jersey. And that's crazy. Now, as you know, I live in upstate New York. I love growing weed. And I will say, and I don't think I'm particularly great at growing weed, but still what I grow is better than anything I've ever had from a dispensary. And that's not a testament to me. I think that's a testament to the small scale. It's like growing tomatoes in your backyard. They're
Yeah.
always going to be better than what you can get at a supermarket, right? And so it would just be nice if you could have a nice, quaint, like a pie breaking contest at the county fair, just a nice home grow contest.
That is a great idea. That is a great idea.
Agreed.
Aaron, you're going to have to bring it home for us. Jersey City can't get its cannabis shit together, can it?
No, it can't. And we still have a few cops, 3 cops I wrote about last week, who still don't have their jobs because they tested positive, a couple of years ago.
And
Uh,
there's no even cannabis commission, right?
Yeah, it's a mess, and so it's yeah. I'm not I'm not a huge I'm not focusing on the cannabis story. We're
Yep.
seeing dispensaries close in Jersey City.
Yeah.
I think we've reached kind of peak cannabis in Jersey City, it seems. But I do think the cop story is important, and I'm wondering why those cops haven't been
It's the
reinstated.
Keystone Cops, I like to call them.
Ah, nice. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Press corps is done for the week. Matt Friedman, Jelani Gibson, Aaron Morrill. Thanks for joining. And thanks to all of you for streaming, liking, and subscribing. I'm David Cruz. We're off next week for the holiday. We'll see you the week after.